This is Michael Clara coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah, with update number 14 to the Spencer Cox signature list cover-up. As many of you know, this last session, the Utah legislature disbanded the citizens-led State Records Committee, replacing it with a single government records officer position that'll act as an administrative law judge. Governor Cox recently appointed Lonny Pehrson. And luckily for us, he has to be confirmed by the Senate. So there'll be a confirmation hearing in committee happening on June 9th at 1 o'clock p.m. There are a number of concerns that people have raised with this nomination by the governor. And so I'll go over the particular one that I have. And you can read, I'll put the link in the comment section here on YouTube. The Salt Lake Tribune wrote a story. Governor Spencer Cox appointed Lonny Pehrson as the first director of the state's new government records office. Pehrson has a history of haphazard record keeping. And I'll go over exactly what that means and the controversy that's surrounding his nomination. We'll kind of dive into that, more particular on what it has to do with the signature verification process. I'll also put in the comments a link to Fox 13 News. They did a story, I believe it's by Nate Carlisle, and it says here, records officer nominee. Before he was nominated to be Utah's first records officer, Lonny Pehrson often found himself arguing to keep documents out of public view, even referring to requests to see the calendar of Attorney General Sean Reyes as a fishing expedition. Meaning that he, as a records officer for the Attorney General's office, he has not been friendly towards citizens at all and their right to be able to view government documents. So it's a concern that this is the kind of person, of all the people to appoint, this is the guy that Governor Cox taps to, be the person, this administrative law judge. But here is kind of an outline of the confirmation process. And again, the good thing for us as citizens, the committee hearing is on Monday at 1 o'clock p.m. And this is just, pointing out that it's in the Constitution to run through this process of confirmation. So one of the points here that we want to look at is that this confirmation hearing, it's going to be a committee of these 7 members. And so if you know any of these members, you want to get a hold of them. Senator Winterton is the chair. You have 2 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and Daniel Thatcher, who's in, I believe it's called the Ford Party. And so we want to get a hold of them and ask them to vote no on this nomination by Governor Cox. Let's go over real quick a timeline of how this pertains to the signature verification process. And as many of you will recall that back last summer, actually this time last summer, on June 21st, because of the controversy surrounding the signature verification process, Davis County Clerk McKenzie issues a public statement saying that everything, in terms of the signature verification process, he's kind of pushing back on anybody questioning it and assured us that everything was done properly. We now know that's not, a lot of what he said is not true. What happened at that time around the first week of July, I was notified by some people that the Lieutenant Governor's office was actually conducting an investigation of forged signatures on Governor Cox's candidate petitions. So, and these people were actually interviewed by an investigator out of the Attorney General's office, and her name was Mikhail Jordan, and she contacted these residents in Vineyard. And so, based on the information that those residents gave me, I filed a grammar request on July 8th. And then on July 22nd, here's the letter I received from Lonny Pehrson in his role as records officer. He says, there are no records. There is no investigation going on. And so we have no records to give you. in terms of an investigation of Governor Cox's candidate petitions. And so, and here's a letter here. And so then what happens next is I file an appeal with the Attorney General's office, and Daniel Burton is the one that signed the letter. I find out through some other records that even though Daniel says in his letter, and he denies my appeal, Daniel Burton does, out of the Attorney General's office, he says he researched my appeal and has determined that there are no records. Well, he didn't research anything. What happens is Pehrson just told him there are no records, and Daniel just signs the letter of appeal, which the reason I'm bringing that up because it defeats the whole purpose of a citizen appealing the decision of the records officer. You typically want another set of eyes to look at that. In this case, that didn't happen. And I'll give you a quick example. I was looking into an issue last year with the Utah State Board of Education. I would file a grammar request, and the records officer, Ben Rasmussen, would deny my request. I would appeal it to the superintendent, Dixon, and a number of times she would overturn it. And she would agree with me that he can't withhold the records for the reasons that he stated, and she would order the release of the records. And then we were done. And that's how it should work. In this case, I filed the grammar request with Lonny Pehrson. He denies it. I file it with Burton, and the appeal with Burton. He denies it. I find out that really Burton didn't look at anything, that it's Pehrson just denying it again. And then in this case, I filed an appeal with the State Records Committee, and the executive secretary refused to forward it to the State Records Committee, and so my appeal wouldn't be heard there, which I believe is a violation of the administrative rules. And so I ended up having to file in September of last year an appeal in 3rd District Court so that we could resolve this issue of Lonny Pehrson claiming 2 times that there is no investigation into the Cox candidate petitions. And I just write down here, at each stage, the existence of the investigation into Governor Cox's candidate petition was denied, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. So let's go over that evidence that I have showing that there is indeed an investigation going on. The first one would be the testimony of the residents in Vineyard that contacted me and said that this Mikhail Jordan, a special agent of the Utah Attorney General, showed them signature petitions that had Governor Cox's name on the top of it, and showed that their signatures were on it and they were forged. And verbally she told them these were Cox petitions. This investigator, Mikhail Jordan, gives them this business card that you see here, and she writes the case number, AG24-170. So that's in us law enforcement types, we call those clues, right? The next clue, quote unquote, that we get that there is an investigation going on by the Attorney General is when Kirby Glad in Utah County, who's the secretary for the GOP there on the county level, he sends out an email to the Central Committee members. And I think he spoke to Brian McKenzie, and I don't know who else he spoke to, but he gets this information, and whoever he's talking to, they tell him that there is an investigation going on by the Attorney General into the Cox signature list. So we get that, in September, we get that confirmation that there is, which again is contrary to what the position is that Lonny Pehrson at the Attorney General's office has taken with this grammar request. The next big quote unquote clue that we get is from the Legislative Auditor General's report that was released on October 15. They say in multiple areas that there is an investigation occurring into the Cox signature list by the Attorney General. And if you follow the series, you know that that's really an indisputable fact, that according to the Legislative Auditor General, there is an investigation, or was at the time, into the Cox signature list. And so here's just another slide showing the parts in their audit where they said that. Another clue that came to my attention was from the lieutenant governor herself. When in November, when I am submitting GRAMA requests for various documents related to Governor Cox's the signature verification process, they tell me that certain nomination petition packets for Spencer Cox were sent to the Attorney General's office for further review. These records would be classified as protected. So fast forward to March of this year, there was an announcement made, all the media covered it, that 11 people charged with forging signatures to help candidate qualify for the 2024 primary election. And what caught my attention is that out of the 11 charged, 5 of those were Gathering Inc. employees. And that's a company that was hired by Governor Cox. 4 of the names out of that 5, only 4 of them show up on the Cox petitions as signature gatherers. And this last one, Benson Aguilar, does not show up on the Cox list. But what ends up happening as I'm doing other GRAMA requests in March and then in April, one of the GRAMA requests I submitted was for this Benson Aguilar, who had he ends up having 2,000 and something signatures that he submitted, but out of that, we're told in the article, and I looked up his indictment, 84 of the signatures are valid. I wanted to see who those 84 signatures, what candidate do they belong to? Where do they go? And so what ends up happening is the lieutenant governor tells me, well, we can't give you any records pertaining to these 84 valid signatures by Aguilar because they are counted towards Governor Cox's signatures. Now, the problem with that is that Aguilar is not even listed as a signature gatherer on the Cox list that we have. And so how are so out of all, this kid turns in 2,000 something signatures and they determined that 84 of them are valid and somehow they're counted towards Cox. And the signatures you reference, they say here, they're part of an ongoing investigation. And so I can't get any copies of it. So again, let's look at this. This is, another clue that there is indeed an investigation going on into the Cox signature list. As Benson Aguilar was going through the court process, I was following all the signature gatherers through the court process. And when I see he's scheduled for a hearing on April 23rd, I see that the case number that's on that business card, the one that I asked to see a copy of because it had to do with Cox signature list, that Pehrson says that's not the case. This is definitive. It's on Aguilar's calendar that this is the law enforcement case number connected to his case in court. So this is definitive evidence. I call it the smoking gun, the court case connection, connecting Aguilar's case to the investigation that Pehrson denied existed, raising serious questions, in my opinion, about his truthfulness and now suitability to be the government records officer. So basically, by review, what we have going on here is that for looking just at Benson Aguilar with the backdrop of this investigation into Cox signature list, that Pehrson is a key player in concealing that from public view. But here we have signatures that were submitted by Aguilar, 2,243, and only 84 of them were valid, and those counted towards Cox's signatures. We have eyewitnesses that say that their signatures were forged on the Cox list. We have this case number that matches. So and then you got the name of Agent Jordan, by the way, she is on the list of, on the indictment of Angulau. Oh, and one of the things I should have mentioned here is the witness connection is that, on the indictment for Benson Angulau, Agent Jordan puts initials in there of people that she interviewed that were victims or witnesses of the forgery. The people I talked to in Vineyard, their initials are on the indictment. So I'm hoping that I'm conveying this appropriately. There's all these connections that there is an investigation going on into the Cox signature list. So here, let's move on now. So I think I've pretty much, in my opinion, has shown that there is an investigation going on, contrary to the assertion of Pehrson. Let's move on to a different part of his abilities to serve or not serve in this new capacity. In 2023, there was an article printed or posted by Eric Peterson, who's an investigative reporter, and it was in the Salt Lake Tribune, and it says, Judge blasts the Office of Attorney General Sean Reyes for haphazard record keeping. And what we find out at that time is that Pehrson, when the judge is criticizing him, because when the records request comes in, he goes to each department head and asks them if they have the records that are being sought. And the judge is saying that's haphazard. You're going with your hat in hand to each person asking them. He said that's inappropriate. You should have a system in place where you can just look up the records that are being asked for. And he says the Attorney General needs to have a better record system. By the way, there was an audit done in 2016 that said the same thing. And here we are in 2023, nothing has happened. And I believe that Pehrson has been the records officer for 8 years. So if nothing else, this man is incompetent as a records keeper for a governmental agency. And now the governor wants to elevate him to this position as an administrative law judge for records, for appeals that citizens are going to be submitting, which is bizarre because he's clearly not qualified. So, there has to be another reason why the governor would appoint an incompetent records keeper to this position. So one of the other things that happened here recently is, remember that appeal that I told you that I filed in September? I had to file it in 3rd District Court. Well, in May, the Attorney General's office submitted a motion for summary judgment, and they basically relied on this declaration or an affidavit by Lonny Pehrson, who says there are no records. And Lonny Pehrson goes in this, and you can pause this and read this. Basically, what this affidavit says, he just goes through and asks each department head, do you have the records? He's looking for this report about investigation into Governor Cox's candidate petition. Do you have it? And so he's doing the very thing that the audit says they should have corrected in 2015, and the thing that the judge calls him out on in 2023. Here we are in 2025. He's doing it again. He doesn't have a system in place to go look up the record that I've requested. And in this affidavit, he also is the one that outs himself in saying that, in searching in number 12, in researching petitioner's chief administrative officer appeal, I again confirmed with Chief Lucy that there was no records responsive to the petitioner's request, meaning that when I filed the appeal, I already explained that Burton didn't look into it, even though Burton says in his letter he researched it. That's a lie. He just had this idiot Pehrson do it again, which is just, ridiculous. So here's what we find out just from reading the analysis of Pearson's affidavit, and this motion for summary judgment reveals a concerning pattern. Rather than using a systematic approach to locate records by case number, Pehrson relied on some haphazard methods previously criticized by the court, raising questions about his commitment to transparency and effective records management. And this is what I call incompetence camouflaging corruption. Because in his affidavit, he doesn't say anything, like he could have looked up the case number. He didn't do that. I gave him the case number in my original records request, AG 24170. He could have just gone to the system and punched that in and looked it up and said, yeah, here's the investigation, or we have it, but we're not releasing it because it's protected. But he doesn't do that. Why not interview Investigator Jordan? He had the business card. So I hope you see this guy is, I think I would like to believe he's not really that incompetent, but this is his method of making sure that records are not released. And so if he does that as a record officer, as an administrative law judge, he's just going to favor, a governmental agency, and reward them by ruling in their favor because they do employ the same, tactics that he does, which is, that they can have some form of deniability. But, when you look into it, like we have the ability to do right now, he's lying. We know he's lying. And I think that he gets away with this kind of stuff because he never banks on the fact that somebody's going to look into it like we have. So there's concerns now about his impartiality to work. If he's confirmed, then he would have sole authority over records disputes, replacing this state records committee. And I don't think that, based on what I've just explained, I don't think he's able to be impartial. And clearly there's conflict of interest here. His prior employment with the Attorney General's office, his desire to have to protect the governor, which just looks like cronyism. That the governor is rewarding him for a job well done in suppressing this investigation into the governor's candidate petitions. And that's wrong. There's no reason, this is all that we're doing here. Instead of giving citizens a qualified administrative law judge, we're just going to get somebody who the governor is rewarding for being a loyal subject. So I write here, Pearson's actions in the Cox petition case raised significant concerns about his ability to navigate these potential conflicts of interest with the necessary independence needed. So let's switch gears here, and I want to, this is the thing that we need to convey to the Senate committee and the members on the Senate committee. They have the authority under GRAMA, Utah Code 63G2-206, to ask for this record. My recommendation is all they need to do is request from the Attorney General case number AG 24170 and ask to see it. And they can then for themselves verify, confirm whether that particular case number, as I've laid out and as I have reason to believe, and following the clues that I laid out, this case number here is about Governor Cox's petitions, signature petitions that he turned in during the primary. And this is a way to verify that. And the senators have the authority to look into that, just to read it. They don't have to reveal it, but they can read it. And more specifically, here's what it says in GRAMA. It says that a governmental entity may provide a record that is private, control, or protected to another governmental entity if the requesting entity is A, the legislature, B, a legislative committee, C, a member of the legislature, or D, a legislative staff member acting at the request of the legislator, a legislative committee, or a member of the legislature. So the sharing of records provision in GRAMA. So in this case, this is a record that, according to Pehrson, doesn't even exist. So it's not even classified as private. However, if one of the senators, it doesn't have to be a senator, it could be a member of their staff, before the hearing, gets with the Attorney General's office, say, hey, I want to see a copy of this. And they don't have to disclose what it says, but they can see for themselves, does it have anything to do with Governor Cox's candidate petitions? And if it does, then they should vote not to confirm him because he's a liar. And so here I write, the legal framework ensures that Senate can fulfill its constitutional role in the confirmation process with access to all relevant information. So basically, I'm just saying, if my accusations are accurate, then he should not be confirmed. Or if I'm not accurate, then confirm him. So key questions for confirmation, for the confirmation hearing as citizens. We should ask the members of the committee to ask Pehrson, did you search specifically for case number AG24-170 when responding to the records request? And if not, why not? Number 2, did you contact investigator Mikhail Jordan directly when searching for the records related to the original grammar request? Number 3, how have you addressed the haphazard record-keeping practices criticizing by Judge Sankey? Number 4, how will you ensure impartial handling of records requests that involve your former colleagues or political allies? And each senator will have the opportunity to question this nominee. And so we want to encourage the senators on this committee to do so. So this is just, I'm not going to read this in the interest of time, but Federalist 76 just talks about the value of confirmation by the Senate on the federal level, but this applies to the state, of an appointee or nominee by the executive branch of government. And the broader implications for transparency. And you could go through these, that we have election integrity, media oversight, accountability, and citizens' participation. My point is that if the Senate allows this confirmation or confirms this nominee without looking into the issues that have been raised, we're going to, as citizens, continue to question these issues. So the government records officer will make decisions that affect every aspect of government transparency in Utah. These decisions will impact election integrity. And so we need to make sure that we get the right person in that position. So hope to see you there at the Senate committee hearing. Please contact members of the committee, express your concerns, urge that they reject this nominee, and attend the hearing. And I'll see everybody there, hopefully at June 9th at 1:00 p.m.